I have a question. A question is that why the coronavirus is affecting to people of specific age. So we're going to try to find out why this is the case. From this website, if we just check, you might have heard as well that if we just look the New York City is website updated the deaths on 14 April. What we see here is that 0 to 17 years old children, total death 3, which is 0.04%, which is almost negligible. And then the death starts from 18 to 40 years, which is 4.5%, and 45 to 64 years, this is 23%, so 23%. And then 65 to 74 is 24%, right? And then 75 years is 47%. So age has something to do with the virus. I mean, how virus reacts with the immune system. We can propose two theories. One theory is that, which is a common theory, that as the age we get aged, the immune system becomes weak. There is a three-layered immune system, and the immune system which prevents the virus to damage our body, that starts getting weak. So that's one theory. But this theory doesn't fit quite well with the Spanish flu 1918. In that situation, in 1918, it was also a similar kind of virus. Only, at that time there was no treatment, no modern hospitals, no the medicine which we do have, no ventilators. The death rate was more. But that virus was more, death rate was more in specific age, which was, the younger than, I think, 45 we will look. So that virus spread to the children, but it started at some age, and then it was above 45, I think we will look, that was quite less. I can show you right now, but first we look what this virus is doing. Another thing is the male are more victim, which is 61%, and the female are 38.2%. These two things we will look this one as well, why this is happening. And then if we look in, this is the China, what happened in China. So China Giant Mission published on 28th February. So this was 28th February published the age of coronavirus death. So this was the age, their age, right? And if we see here again, and 0 to 9%, there's no fatalities. And then if we look 10 to 19 years, so is when you get 19 years is a 0.2%, and still it is 0.2% until 29. So still 0.2% if you are 39, right? And then it get double in the next 10 years, 4 to 49. But here it is, if you see this age, this is now 4 times of this one. So just 10 years and the 4% more death rate, and is the next 10 years, this is again another 3% of this one, right? So it's like 3 times the chances of dying in the next, if you are older, from each next stage. And here is also almost um, more than a double, right? And 80 years is 21%, which is again more than a double. So the age has something to do. One thing we know is immunity, it does drop with the age. But one thing I was thinking by reading the Spanish flu, that it didn't, kill, it didn't take lives of old people, and the reason at that time was there were two reasons speculated. Now we go to the what happened in the Spanish flu, and we look what was going on. So the purpose of our this discussion is to find out what's going on with the coronavirus, and is there a vaccine already in use and we can use it. So what I think is there are two possible reasons. I'm going to find out the Spanish flu. I opened somewhere here. Um, right. So COVID-19 infection, novel coronavirus attack, immune system, age. Maybe this one paper. Yeah, I opened the paper. So is age specific mortality during 1918 influenza pandemic? Mystery of high young adult mortality. So young died more, right? And adult as well. So if we say just immune system, weak immune system mean there are more death going to be with this virus. That theory seems wrong here. So what else is going on? So there are two possibilities, right? One thing is the old people are not exposed to this virus before and they don't have any immunity, but how can they not be exposed? Their age is more. So the one theory we can propose is they have not been vaccinated against some virus, and that vaccination is providing immunity. Now, I did hear some people were talking about vaccination even again. Tuberculosis has produced some immunity against the coronavirus. The country where there were no tuberculosis vaccine, they have more mortality. But I would assume that especially if there is a vaccine against a virus which is quite similar in structure to the coronavirus, then those people might have immunity. And these old people, the more aged people, don't have any exposure to the viruses, the similar kind in the form of vaccination. So that is what my theory. And then we're going to look whether there is any, you know, any facts that we should believe in our story. So what happened during 1918 is, if I just show you the graph, this is the graph, and this is the recorded death from all cases by age in Montreal and Toronto, September and October 1918. So Toronto, is the city in Canada. I think Montreal will be. So we can look for Montreal. Where is it? It should be in Canada. The same. So Montreal. I'm just going to open and we look where is it. Some of you will know, but I want to find out. Montreal. Right. I hope it's the same country. Is the most populous city. So yeah, it's a Canadian city. So this disease spreads more. The virus spreads more in populated cities. Because the transmission from one person to another person is quite easy. That people can walk closer. They can do shopping in a shopping center at a closest distance where they will breathe. And if someone is a carrier or even infected, the virus can reach at a new hosts during transport, when people are traveling in buses, in trains, in subways, right? So the more chance of spread of this virus is in um, in more populous places, more populous cities and crowded places. So we were looking for the paper. I go it again. So what was this virus doing there? So if we see here, this is death rate and is 125 is the maximum. This is not sparing to the children under the age of 10. It's maximum 125 and total is, if I check the total, how many total? I'm going to read a little bit here. Source of the number death from all causes recorded. So this is all causes. So yes, rate of the growth. It may be 125 out of 10,000, but we need to find out. They haven't written in the graph. Um, so if we look somewhere, usually is in 10,000s, and if I make it a little bit bigger, so 3 years, where they, so this is a graph. Right, rate of growth during, so they are talking about growth and death, the way they calculated. Catholic 1908, it was assumed that the proportion was same. It was, we also report the buffer our fluctuation. I was looking for how many total people are from. So mortality rate peaks approximately same age. Yeah, here we can read a little bit. Mortality rate instead of death counts does not fundamentally alter the results. Figure 2. This was the figure. Obviously, the figure we looked. Obviously, in the relative terms, rate appear higher than death counts at an older ages, because there are few people alive at older ages, making the unsmooth rates quite erratic and preventing us from plotting rather after age 75. So he's talking about after 75 we couldn't plot the graph because few people will be after 75 living, so that's fine. Yet revealing the well-known W-shaped curve. So it was W-shaped, we have seen it. So the less age is killing more, which is not doing, it is doing opposite now. So from 1 to 9, if we go here on the graph, yeah, 1 to 10, 1 to 9 we have already seen. It's not, those children are spared here. But here it was not sparing them. 125 were maximum fatality between, little babies born until the age of 10. There was a lot of fatalities, and then it was gradually decreased until 10, right? So this and then it was more here. It was maximum at 30, so 30 were exposed more, and then at 40 it came down 45, and then people after 40, here if we see 45 has more, but then after it is less, and these age people. So if we talk about just immune system was involved, so if just immune system we are talking about, then these people should have, they should have be more victim. But this was not the case, and this virus is similar to the coronavirus, similar to this one. So then we have to think about why the old people are now victim. So what happened here? We will look later. Right now, we just looked here. I was reading from here that what happened here, obviously what happened is revealing that well-known W-shaped, we have seen it, curve of the Spanish flu, and mortality rate peak at approximately the age of 28 to 29. So if you are age 28 to 29, mortality rate was quite high as the death counts 28. We will look it again. The peak is less pronounced for the smooth curved, but this mostly depends on the bandwidth of the loess, using the shorter bandwidth, which so is talking about peak not curved, right? So there are two lines. One is Toronto. So if you look at Toronto, is little bit higher than The Montreal, it could be it was more populous, and there are two. One is October 19, is September 19. So if dotted is dotted is September, right? And then this line is September as well. But the bigger the dot, we have seen here, these are the some other dots. So what happening here is in Toronto people are dying less, I think, but the more in Montreal. So October. So in October, we're talking about October, and then Montreal October, which is a black one. This one, and then Montreal September, which is this one. So in September, so this month the fertility was less. This is almost the same, right? But this here the virus may be changed. So we will look virus mutated, and then what happened is, or it has spread. In September it may be like we are like what's happening now, that in September it was not spread much. But what happened is in October it caused the maximum damage, and then here we see the is almost same. Montreal city a little bit more, right? But what we learn here is that 10-year age children, they are here a little bit spared, right? And but the less age that you are, then more victim you are, and after 10 mortality is higher until 28. He said, yes, it looks like same here, 28. And the 100 out of, I was looking for out of what? Out of, I think, will be 10,000. We will look. So, and then mortality rate is less after 40, after 40, 45, especially the 50 years are spared, 60, 70, right? So, so what happened? Smaller sliding window for the moving average. He's talking about just about the graph. Obtaining a share point 28, he said, is maximum. It's difficult, however, to know what extends the mortality rate at age 20 is genuine results from the particle attraction at that age. Further, it is abundant to realize that the years surrounding the 98 pandemic included two major disruptions of the population pyramid: the First World War and the pandemic itself. It certainly introduces biases, especially in the estimation of the population at risk. Yeah, he's talking about, the young people will die more due to war. So that's the other thing he's talking about. The migration or the delocalization of the young individual and the young family that followed the end of the First World War. The estimates even more difficult. The extreme caution should be exercised in its interpretation. He's saying that extreme caution should be, when you're interpreting, you have to take caution because there was a war going on. The young people were dying more due to war. I think that's what he's saying. That especially in the estimation of population at risk, the migration of the delocalization of the young individual and the young family that follow the end of the first war, the estimation even more difficult and extreme caution should be. We know what to do, so they must have done something to eliminate that effect. We now introduced the addition localization. When is this published? There's another thing we can look. So this paper, age specific mortality, is published. What is the year? If we look at the year, here should be, oh yeah, 2013, right? So we were reading this graph, and then we talk about this. We now introduce additional location. So they have introduced additional locations. See what happens there. Where the pattern noticed in the Montreal and the Toronto can be generalized. So he's talking about we want to generalize it. And what they have done now, USA, they have death rate reported for the USA and Bureau of the Census. Yeah, so Bureau of the Census, they reported in the USA with the Bureau of the Census. Also, evidence of notable estimation problem, we decided to have leave aside these rates and no extract raw death counts instead. For the same reason, we refrained from using age specific population number from the Canadian census data in the remainder of this paper. Figure 3. So they have figure 3, death between 15 age 15 and 45 as a percentage of all the deaths within this age range. So percentage of all the deaths they are calculating. We utilize the same data from the Montreal and Toronto in figure 1 and added other data from the death registration from the Ontario and the death register index from the other Canadian location, as well as the death bureau from this tubulation location in the US. So they are collecting data from different places. We haven't seen the figure 1. I think we should see the figure 1. Let me show you the figure 1. This was the figure 1, was it? So yeah, this was the figure 1, right? So now we're going to go to second figure, and what they have done here is again the same city, but data they have collected from different places, and it is again the same. The figure 2, this is the figure 2, death rate from all the cases by age in Toronto during the month of October. So October is again the same. So if you use Montreal, the little bit smaller, and then smoothen, they have smoothened it now, but it was like that, right? If we even smoothened, so what's going on? Again, it's the same ratio. Means lesser than 10 years, they are dying more, and then maximum death is 28 here, and then again 45, the age is 55, the death rate is less, but it's rising here at 60, 65, 70. So here after 55, 60, the death is rising. So what he is telling here is we use a percentage pool death. Now for the 4 model, so what do we have learned so far? Finally, the additional information causes the death. So this is I think we go to another graph, which is this one, and this is distance distribution of death from all causes by age. So this is all cases by age, and what was this cases? Ages. So yeah, this is all cases as well. So this is again all cases, and then other Canadian locations again is the same distribution death from all the cases, percentage death between the 50 and 45 in all the Canadian and American locations. They have added American as well. So what is happening here is again, if we 15, after 15 the death is more and goes up here, and then 45 is going down. So death is more here by age and percentage of the death between age 15 and 45 all the way. So this is what's going on. So what we can learn from this? One, of course, theory we can present is that people who are younger, what they are doing is they are taking part more in a war, and they're dying due to that. But they should have been, subtracted those numbers and see the all from all cases death from other reasons, right? So here the death is like that. All right, this is a percentage, right? How many percentage? 6%, 7%, 8%, like this age. So then what we learn from here? We're going to go look another graph and just go towards the discussion. So I just speculate the two reasons there can be. One reason is these deaths, if not due to the wars, then just due to the disease, the more death of this age. Then one reason is that the people who are aged, they have been exposed to the same kind of virus before, and it was Russian flu, and that did happen before 19th century. We'll check the date, and then they have immunity against that. Uh, that's one proposal, that they were immune against that virus, and so that's why they were spared by this virus. The other thing is that these age group, all these age group, right? They were exposed to the virus, which they were exposed to a specific virus, So the first we talking about these people, these aged people. So not I'm now sorry I said Russian flu. Maybe another one originated from Russia. That was I think for this age group. So we will look at the thing is these age group have been exposed to one virus and they have immunity. The virus could be similar to the Spanish flu. That's why they have resistance. It's kind of similar way they were a little bit vaccinated and that's why the resistance against the virus fatality was less. And the other theory is that this age group they were exposed to a virus and that virus changed their immune system and now they reacted more aggressively with that virus. They reacted aggressively and due to that fight with the cytokine storm which is the immune response of the body, the more inflammation due to more reaction of the immune system, and this virus resulted in more death in this generation. So we will read the discussion what they say. So if we go to the discussion and discussion, we're going to learn something about this coronavirus. So what here is that influenza virus through the anti-genetic shift, it shifted and then and drift remained a significant threat to the public. That's why it happened that times. He says it still is a that threat. Next pandemic will emerge in unpredictable form. So he's talking about in 2013 that another pandemic can emerge, and then we won't know what will happen. Unforeseen consequences. We don't know what will the consequence for the age pattern mean. What will be the age more victim, more morbidity, how many deaths will be, mortality, how many will be. Although immunological studies are primarily important, historical data provide important information about the context in which the virulent strain of the influenza originates and it sweeps through the population. It's talking about that how the virus strain influenza, they variate and then originate and then they spread to the population. And understanding the usual age-specific morbidity, during 1918 influenza virus pandemic, it is important to distinguish between intrinsic susceptibility to the infection, and susceptibility to severe outcome following the infection. So that's what I was talking about. There is two things. One is to intrinsic susceptibility to infection, like who is going to be infected, right? And then susceptibility to severe outcome. Now, the after next stage is like suppose everyone is infected right now with the coronavirus. It doesn't discriminate. Everyone is infected, but outcome is different. So susceptibility to severe outcome. So the severe outcome is in old age and they are dying more. So that's what he's talking about. Following the infection, two things will count. Who dies, whose death rate, which age death rate is going to be more. Intrinsic age specific susceptibility to influenza virus infection in 1980 has been difficult to assess due to the inavailability to deconvolute multiple confounding factors, including the pre-existing immunity. He's talking about it's quite difficult, and because why it is difficult, because one thing as I was talking is who had more immunity, pre-existing immunity or condition arising from the First World War. He's talking about whether we don't know, can't actually compare precisely whether those people have pre-existing immunity like the old people or whether the condition arising from the First World War. However, no convincing data exists to suggest any major age-specific variation. But here says no convincing data to intrinsic susceptibility to influenza virus infection except in pediatric and elderly population. All right, he's talking about in old in elderly population, pediatric population. the data is reliable. So he's not talking about, the more young population, like convincing data, because, due to war he's talking about. There are other factors, but he says the old elderly population, yes, the data is convincing. Therefore, it is highly unlikely that difference could be counted for the pronounced differences in morbidity and mortality of 20 years old versus those who are 40 to 60. It is highly unlikely that such difference could account for the pronounced difference in morbidity and mortality of 28 years old versus those who were 40-60. This is talking about 28 and 46 means there was a difference, but he's saying you're highly unlikely that it was the morbidity and mortality. Could be other factors, but he is sure about what happened with the old people, and that is something to do with the old. We propose now the going to be give speculation proposal that the major antecedent of the Spanish flu pandemic was the Russian flu pandemic, and so he's talking about there was a Russian flu before, and that time distance between the two is crucial for understanding the age-specific mortality in 1980. So that time is different. We argue that developing the immunological memory to an anti-genetically dissimilar influenza subtype in early life may actually subvert the immune system, thereby increasing the risk of death when the individual is infected by a novel strain. So he is talking about the opposite way that we talk about now coronavirus. We say the coronavirus before was another type, which was the SARS, and we say that people who was infected with the SARS, uh, uh, they people who are infected with the SARS, they are now less, they're more, their death rate is less due to the similar strain. But here, what he is saying is that there was a Russian flu. We argue that the developing immunological memory, memory is when you get infected with the virus and then you memorize that virus, your body memorize your immune system, and then next time your immune system react quite good and kills the virus. But as a result of killing the virus, there is a reaction in the body. Its body produce some cells which cause inflammation, and if that reaction is too much, the inflammation can cause secretions, and that secretions. So in this case of coronavirus, the secretions get trapped in the lungs, and lung get like drowned with the fluids, and it cause breathing problems. So this was a similar kind of problem. He is saying anti-genetically dissimilar influenza. He's saying is although the influenza was not very similar, antigenically dissimilar. So antigen, we're talking about antigen. It was, he's talking about antigen. So he's antigenically, it was a different kind of influenza. That's why he's saying. So maybe those antigen react because those antigen was dissimilar. They were different antigen. When that influenza was spread, the body has antigens, and those antigens were different antigen, dissimilar antigen. Sometime in early life may have actually subverted the immune system. So it subverted the immune system, thereby increasing the risk of death when the individual is infected by a novel strain. This was another strain, but the antigens which they have, they were similar, they were dissimilar, they were different, and those antigens reacted with these antigens, right? When individual is infected by the novel strain, so those then what happened is due to that fight. So again, he is showing us a graph, pandemic related causes. Yeah, so here is a red line. So this is pandemic, nothing pandemic. All other causes is this one, so we can ignore all other causes, which is this one. So pandemic is quite, so this is this here separately here, pandemic related causes, and then pandemic related causes, US locations, and then Canadian Ontario. So first we look the Canadian. So this is pandemic related. Again, if we see, it's the same. So those graph which we have seen before, uh, they were pandemic related. Here, because I see is because I was thinking they must have been, remove the other deaths. That's why you can make a sense in a graph. There is any effect of age. So what they have done is here age related death due to pandemic. So this is the due to pandemic, and you see the again 25. So the less than 10 more prone 5% if you're 1 year, and then death is decreasing until 10, and then is high again until the here. So which is, if I show you, sorry, until 25. So 25 or 28, right? Yeah. So if I look here, right, and then 28 something, and then it's down 40, right? 40 is less, and then 45, 50 is so this was the thicker line. Okay, we have to look at this thicker line, right? So this thicker line is less. 40 after 45 is coming down, 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 down. So that's why he is surprised that if you are aged, why are you less victim of this virus? So this mean immunity has nothing to do with this. Um, with this influenza in 1918 Spanish flu, because these people, if we're talking about immunity, they have less immunity. So if they have a less immunity, why they are dying less? So here he has proposed one theory that this population was not means this population have less antigens against a virus, and which against a virus, right, with whose antigens were different than this virus. And this virus, when produce antigens, those antigens and these antigens have a reaction, and it causes more inflammation. But it caused more inflammation in these young people, but not in these, because so why not in these old people? One theory is, why not in these old people? Because they were exposed a long time ago, and their antigens have depleted, they have finished, they have gone from their immune system, so their immune system reacted less. So if we take the coronavirus, we will think about why it is why the old people are more victim. In next video we will talk about this one, but here we are just focusing on um, age related relationship of 1918 influenza, and then we will compare that one, and we'll find out some solution. We'll try to find out some solution, some causes why the coronavirus is causing so many deaths, and that solution can help us. We will do our best, see where we goes. So we just looking at the graph again. So these are the, as you can see, these pandemic related causes, and so these are pandemic related. You can see clearly the graph, pandemic related, right? And then dotted one are in the USA. So USA has less death rates, right? But it's still the age is the same, is going at the same, at same age is going up, going down, and then this is going down, 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 right? And this was going down here, so they are quite close. And this is the other cases are right after age, you die with other reasons. So after age, so these are other cases, you're dying a little bit more, 1%, right? And then if we look this one, yeah, it's the same. And here is less because those people are less, right? Maybe those people, you will talk about 100, those people, the number will be less, so he's comparing total deaths. Of course, there is, if less proportion than of this age group, then people are going to have less percentage of death, right? So now we look, we argue, yeah, this is, we have studied, we argue that developing a immune memory to an anti genetically dissimilar influenza in early life may actually subvert the immune system, thereby increasing the risk of death when the individual is infected in a novel strain, right? And subvert the immune system. What happened with the immune system? We had talked about already. If we just look subvert the immune system, what happened with the immune system? So it has changed in such a way. So immune system has antigens, and they react with the new antigen. Subvert the immune system. How pathogen target and subvert. So this is bacteria back. How pathogen target and subvert to the host in innate immune system. So only subvert is undermine the power and authority of an established system. So a subvert is gonna undermine, is a weaken, right? So yeah, undermine, subvert is going to be undermine, attempt to subvert democratic government. So that's undermine the power. So that's what happened is it was undermine the power. So I'm going to go it again, subvert the immune system, thereby increasing the risk, right? Their immune system is compromised now. So here yearly age-specific death counts were available from 0 to 4, 18 to 30 on the US location. Specific table were tabulated. So he's talking about what they have done, and then collaboration, age group. This one divided number of death in the interval by its length, plotted what they have done in a graph. Death above the age 65 are not available by the age or age groups for the US location. So, but this I think they have available, right? Now, later in life, we were talking about later in life, their immune system was compromised because they was already exposed to a virus, which was like which have antigen, but those antigen were different, right? That's why when another strain of a virus attacked, the immune system was compromised. Explain above, such mechanism would elucidate the a typical shape of the mortality during 19 pandemic reported here. Exposure during the critical period, right? Sorry, exposure during the uh, critical development in infancy. So we're talking about infancy because they were dying more, the babies, poor babies. Exposure during the critical period of development. Infancy could also permanently affect later life health and mortality. He's talking about that if you are infected with one virus, later if another strain comes whose antigens are different, then you could affect. That's what he is explaining, that during the 1918 pandemic, exposure during the critical period. So if there is an infant who was exposed during this time, could also permanently affect later life health. So right now, if someone has a coronavirus, what he is saying is, in the later life, if another virus comes whose antigen is different, is mutated, they would be more victim of this virus. That's what he's saying. That's why he's saying happened at that time, and that mortality through clonal changes in the T cell receptor, in the T cell repertoire, impaired lung maturation or metabolism alternation. So he is talking about T cells, and that changes in T cells happen, and this coronavirus also attacks on T cells. So it's kind of similar kind of this virus, lung maturation and metabolism alternation. So it changes the alternation in the lungs, and it changes the metabolism. Yet, despite the complete compiling evidence, these explanations remain incomplete. He's saying it's not, we don't have every kind of explanation. At a minimum, more detailed analysis using exact age right from historical birth and death record of 18, 19, 18 are needed. So he's saying we need a death record of this 18 and this 18, 89 and 90. I think that's the flu before, which was Russian flu. A major difficulty with the data in hand needed possibility of age heaping, which we noticed earlier, may distort historical death counts. This could be have effect of the resulting report by who found a peak of mortality at the age of 26 during the fall of 19 and not the age 28. So he's saying these are a little bit different, Another researcher said 26, but we still can assume 26 and 28 was the, more fertility at that age. Age heaping in 1910 and 1920, American cause census does not seem to have been accounted for in that paper. So he's talking about they did not count the American population estimate for 1918 were obtained by interpreting between the two census. This perhaps inflated the denomination used to calculate the death rate of age 28, given that the people that age in 1980 and 20 and in 30 were 20 and right he's talking about they were at 20 in 1908 were 20 and 30 in 1910. So he is talking about to calculate the death at age 28, given that the people in age 98 were 20 and 30 in 19 and 30 in 1910 and 1920 respectively. He's talking about in 1910 and 20 2 years he is talking about, and he is saying that there will be 20 and 30, 20 in 1910 and in 1920 they will be at 30 years, right? But why he said the domination used to calculate the death rate at age 28, given that people the age in 90 in age in 1908 were 20, 19 age and 98 were 20 and 30 and 98 and 20 respectively. Yeah. So in 1910 and 1920 he is talking about two things, that in 1918 someone will be 20 years, after 10 years he will be 30. That's fine. So age heaping is highest for the numbers with zero at a which calculate the extent of the heaping. We were fairly high in US census of the first decades of the 20th century. Smoothing the technique can be used to flatten age distribution, which he has done. So he is trying to be, very specific that we don't do any error. So that's why he's saying the age heaping, but is not clear whether interpolating population number between two census separated by 10 years can provide a reliable exact age estimate. So he is talking about that we have, pooled two ages like American and then Canadian, and then he is creating a little bit doubt that whether it is totally accurate, especially since the 10-year interval included major distribution to the population pyramid. First World War and 1980 influenza pandemic, who also used data from the US Census for the preliminary analysis on age specific. Right. Mortality risk from the influenza pandemic found a mode in mortality range of 30 to 40 for the country as a whole, corresponding to the peak age of 4 or 5 years older than the peak of 26 found by the. He is giving different references because someone did research, after, right, they will have more age, right? Age 25 country as a whole, mode and mortality rate at age. Influenza pandemic found a mode and mortality rate 30 to 40 the country as a whole, corresponding to the age 4 or 5 years older than the peak of 26. He's saying giving different references, right? I think we go to the result and discussion. This is a conclusion what he have done. Oh no, I think we have to read this one. That is the only data here we have. Okay, so what he has said is mortality risk from influenza. Someone other researchers he is saying the 30-40 rate the country as a whole, means this was the highest death rate to the peak age at least 4 or 5 years older than the peak 26. So he's saying we have a peak, someone for under 26 peak and another 30 to 34. Right, so using population size to the calculated mortality rate in their final grain analysis. Right, age specific mortality during the 1957 and 96 pandemic in Canada. So now 1918 is over. There is another, now is using the same theory that some people will be exposed to 1918 virus, right? And then what happened in 1915 7 and 1968 pandemic. So there was another pandemic in Canada. One is 1957 and then other is 1968. So what happened there? So this is, if we take about 1918 and then 57, so you add another 39, yeah, another 39 years, and then the 68, and then other 11 years, 39 and 11 is 50 years, right? And so what happened in this study, we also avoided the distortion associated with the early 20th century since we were focusing on the age specific data, right? Um, uh, should I go the full scale like that? Ah, yeah, okay. Oh, sorry. I think that was fine. So we just focus here. So in this study, we also avoided the 20th century census by focusing on age-specific death, not rate. Even though we report a rate in order to illustrate our finding, don't disappear when rates are calculated. This resulted in a peak in influenza death centered on the age 28 over a wide range of geographical location. It is certainly possible that the death count themselves are influenced by the age heaping at 28 and 30. However, redistribution using locally weighted regression in the figure was not large enough to significantly affect the pattern. So he is now here sporting what they have done. That 28 and 30 is fine. That was the more mortality. Found that Meatal found usually large antigenic changes. So we were talking about antigenic changes, right? Antigenic changes is antigen. That's what our body produced to fight with the virus. So what happened is 1918, 1920, after 10 years, and 1946, um, de- delineated boundaries for the birth years age with increased mortality during the 1957. So they have more mortality in 1957. Large antigen changes 1918, 20, 1946. Boundaries for the birth year. So someone born these years with increased mortality during 1957 pandemic, in contrast with our observation that exposure early in life to the previous 1819 pandemic was associated with peak mortality in 1908. So he is talking about that someone was exposed in this flu, which is Russian, is called 1918. Oh, we just look now, was it Russian? So in this flu, if someone was exposed, he is, just giving a proposal. So this flu, I hope, flu pandemic. So is a flu better known as it was a cytic or Russian flu was a deadly influenza pandemic that killed about 1 million people worldwide. So this was right one world. So we're not going to go in detail of this one, but we just want to confirm that his theory that this is a pandemic better known as a cytic flu, a Russian flu, was deadly influenza pandemic that killed about 1 million people worldwide. It was last green pandemic in 19th century. The most reported effect of the pandemic took place. Okay, so we go back to our question again. So now what he is proposing it that was associated with the peak mortality in the 90s. He said this pandemic was associated with peak mortality in 1980. But what happened here is he's saying 1918, 28, and 1946 changes, large antigenic changes due to exposure to virus during these years. So increased mortality in 19 with increased mortality in the contrast with our observation, exposure early in the life of the 1980 was associated with peak mortality in 1998. He is talking about here, this is a different. So why is the difference? Although antigenic imprinting appears relevant in both cases, he is saying it appears relevant, right? What happened here is large antigenic changes, it happened here, and deleted boundaries of birth with increased mortality during 1957. So he's saying is more mortality here, right, of these people who were born during this time who have been exposed to these viruses. So then he is saying is what happened here is if someone is was has born this time or has been exposed to this virus with peak mortality in the 1998, so 1998 they died more. So what happened is he is saying is this is different, so the scenario is contrast, is opposite. um, Although antigenic imprinting appear relevant in both cases, he's saying still antigen imprinting, the immune system memorizes the antigens, memorizes the virus, right, in the form of antigens. And so he's saying, although it does have a role, it seems to have led in one instance different protective immunity. So he's saying it seems to have led in one instance different, which is a protective immunity when 1957. So what happened here is he says 1957. So that's what happened. The people who are here, they were protected in 1957. So who were exposed to these viruses after another virus came, so they were protected. He said what happened this time, it was protected, right? But what happened in 1918? The people who were exposed before, during this one, they were not protected. It did opposite. So pandemic was associated with peak mortality in the 1918. Although antigen imprinting appear relevant in both cases, he's saying in both cases they are relevant. It seems that it has led to one instant different protective immunity. 1957 it was protective, and other differential severity. 1918 it was differential severity. So what happened in 1918 was this was different than people who were exposed before. So people who were exposed to this pandemic, right, in 1998 they died more. So if someone is more aged, they were less exposed. Their death rate was less. So if someone was older than this date of birth, so if someone was born in here, he will be 28 years, right? So they still have antigens, and this virus have different antigens, and due to those antigens, he says immune system reacted very badly. Is kind of giving a different blood group, right, to another to a patient, and then if that person has antigen against those blood, it can react, right? So he's giving the same way that virus, uh, this pandemic has a different pattern. Here what happened was people who were exposed, who were young, they died more, and old people had less antigens, they died less. Well, what happened here is um, people who were exposed during this time, right, or even during this pandemic, another 10 years during this pandemic, what happened is they have immunity against this one. So this what happened is this was different. Mean this should have the same antigen needed to protect from this virus. The antigen they have some left from this pandemic, so those antigen kill the virus. So here, if we consider the coronavirus, right, the people who are spared now, who are not dying, so we can speculate, and we will discuss that one in the next video, that those people have been exposed before to a virus which has some kind of same antigens, and those antigens are helping them to fight with this virus. And only way they have been exposed, one way is they have been exposed to this virus in the form of vaccination. So we will look which vaccination they have been exposed, they have been vaccinated against which virus, and which vaccine is helping them. And those vaccines are already in use, and they are approved by FDA. So we will look in next lecture, in next our video, that which vaccine has some role in giving immunity to the children and to young people against coronavirus. And so here what we have learned is that if you are exposed to the one virus, you can have like these three viruses strains, you can have immunity against a later strain of the virus if the virus has same kind of antigens. The body produces same kind of antigens against that virus. But if you have been exposed to a virus and then another virus comes, and you have immunity against that virus, but antigens are different. They are opposite to that, and if they react, your immune system will react pretty bad. But here we can speculate as well, but was there any influenza virus before, any flu virus before, which has affected the old people, and they have now the antigen which is opposite. So if they have been exposed to any virus and they have no anti antigens anti which are opposite to this coronavirus, and due to that reason their immune system is reacting very bad. So that can be still another reason that the old people have been exposed to a virus similar to that one, similar to this situation. They have been exposed to a virus and similar to this one, and then they are reacting more. But people who have been born later, they have not been exposed to that strain of virus, so they don't have antigens which are, different, opposite antigens. So here we look, the opposite antigens, they don't have the opposite antigens. So we have talked about before, yes. So they don't have those antigens, right? I think it was here, I show you again. So there was the theory here they proposed here at the end. Also used it, I think, let me look at that again. If we go here, so influenza pandemic found a model rate of 30-40, there's a rate, and then what is the using the size, mortality, industry wide distortion, that's fine, and then influenza death centered age 28 over wide. However, the redistribution found that usually large antigenic changes, antigenic, I think we have read before, so antigenic changes, so it was before, well before, we don't want to go that much behind, but it was somewhere here. Yeah, that's Russian flu. Proposed that the major antecedent of the Spanish flu was the Russian flu, and antecedent of the Spanish flu was the Russian flu. So the pandemic, and that the time distance between the two is crucial for understanding the age-specific mortality. That's why he's saying we argue that developing immunological memory to an antigenically dissimilar influenza. So he's saying antigenically dissimilar influenza. They have an influenza before whose antigens are dissimilar. They're not similar, right? And if they're not similar, then they are reacting with each other. That's why his theory is. So now what is going on with coronavirus? We will try to know, but first we finish here the discussion. What can happen? So why some age is affected more and other is less? So what have they been? We have understood now that the people who were exposed to this Russian flu, they are saying after 1918 they reacted badly. Those were young people, but the old people were the not old people exposed to this? If people were old, they were also exposed. So why is the theory going on here? So 1898 pandemic, right? The old people will be still at that time was associated with peak mortality in 1988. So what reason can be? Old people, the only one reason can be that the young people was associated with peak mortality in 1988. So 28. So the old people, why is the reason? Maybe here, because if old people are also at that time, they were at that time in 1819. So why was they not exposed? Maybe the old people, the immune system responded poorly, so they have less antigens. That's one theory we can give. That yes, the people was at that time, the old people was still there, but their immune system they produce antigen but less. That's one theory. But although antigen imprinting appears relevant to both cases, it seems that In one instance, in differential protective immunity, 1957 he says is immunity. So his speculation, could be wrong. We have to think about and summarize at the end. He is saying the people who have been exposed to this virus, they were protected this time, um, uh, years with increase for the birth with increased mortality due to the 1950 pandemic. But here what he's saying is that usually large antigen changes, right? So antigen changes during the delineated boundaries for birth year age with he's talking about birth year age with increased mortality due to 1950 pandemic, in contrast with the observation that exposure early in the life to previous 89 was associated with peak mortality in 1988. I think he has done some error. So what he wanted to say is it should be decreased mortality here. 1957 is the decrease, and then he's saying this was a different to what associated with peak mortality. So it was peak mortality in 1988. So he has done error in writing. Although antigens imprinting appear that relevant in both cases, it seems that have led in the instance to differential protective immunity. In 1957, he says protective immunity. Yeah, so you are protective, right? If you have been exposed before to a virus, that's what he wants to say. So if you have been exposed to these three viruses, you should be protective, right? So that's why he's saying is immunity. So differential protective immunity, and the other differential severity. So other differential severity, 1988, what happened was, if you are exposed before, you're going to get worse. So differential severity. So they were exposed before. 1918 we are talking about. If you are exposed to this one, you're going to react severely. So differential severity likely because of the sequential ordering of the pandemic. Sequential ordering of the pandemic, hemoglobin subtype, hemagglutinin subtypes, ordering of the pandemic hemagglutinin subtypes. The global head domain of the H1 and H2 exhibit substantial antigenic differences. So this is talking about immune system cells. They remember. So they have a memory. So what happens is when you are exposed to a virus, so your body will remember it, immune system will remember it, and there will be sequential altering of the cells, hemagglutinin subtypes. The global head domain of the H1 and H2, sorry, exhibit substantial antigenic differences. So there is antigen differences. However, the stark domain on which they rest is nearly identical. So where the antigen rests, he's saying those domains are identical, likely inducing a substantial level of cross-protective immunity between the two subtypes. So he is saying two subtypes there will be immunity if they are resting on the antigen domain on which they rest is nearly identical. If there is identical, then there will be substantial immunity. So the H3 hemagglutinin, however, so he's talking about different immunogglutinin immune cells, H1, H2, H3 hemagglutinin. However, what does it do? Glutenin, however, differs in both head and stalk domain from H1 and H2 subtypes, and therefore likely to elicited a cross-protective response to either of the two. So it will be protective response of either of the two. If the 1890 pandemic was indeed caused by H3 and X subtypes, he is talking about no subtype, right, of the virus H3N. So these are influenza type virus, right? He is saying there are one type, another type, and three types. So if this pandemic was indeed caused by H3N subtype, so this is the type of the virus, and he has explained before what is H3, H1, and 2. So what happened is commitment very early in the life to this subtype would have led to an immune profile offering little or no humoral protection to the anti-genetically dissimilar H1 subtype. So he is saying if the 1980 someone is exposed, right, this kind of virus which is H3, subtype, and then what happen is commitment very early in the life to this subtype. So early आपकी जो life is quite you're quite young, uh, would have led to immune profile offering little or no hormonal protection to the anti-genetically dissimilar HN1. So he is saying after that in 1918 there was a different virus, right? It was H1N type, and then what happened is it didn't help them. Offering little or no humoral protection, it did, anti-genetically dissimilar tha, and it didn't help. That emerged in 1988. So that's why he's saying that it didn't help, leaving the pattern of age-specific mortality dominated. So age, that's why the death was due to age by the differential severity. So the disease was severe in some cases, and older people were less. Finally, the age-specific expression of morbidity and mortality in any pandemic is contingent on the population experience of the previous pandemic. So he's saying if you have a previous experience of pandemic, it does have effect, is a contingent. So here, one thing we have studied, we're going to finish this one, that he's talking about 1890, which is Russian flu, that if someone is exposed to that one and subtype is this one of the virus, so then what happen is commitment very early in the life to this subtype would have led to immune profile offering little or no hormonal protection. So if you're young, he's saying after later there is no hormonal no protection, anti-genetically different subtype, right? But that's what happened, and leaving the pet age specific reality. So he's saying the young people have less protection, right? But if I read to here again, so these different type he is talking about, we need to understand 1 3, and the other differential severity likely because the sequential ordering of the pandemic, hemoglobin subtype. So he's talking about pandemic hemoglobin subtype. The global head domain of the H1 and the H2 exhibited substantial antigenic difference. He's talking about the global head domain of the H1, H2. They are substantially antigenic different. So H1 and H2, he's saying they are different, right? And the Stark domain, so what the global head domain, so he's talking about hemoglobin subtypes. So we can look at this hemoglobin subtype should have two domains. One is the global head domain, other is the Stark domain. And if I look, what is it? We just look, right? So here is one thing he has said, and then after that we will summarize, and then subtypes, hemoglobin subtypes. Types of influenza virus, hemoglobin, so hemoglobin is, we look what is, so this is the hemoglobin. Influenza hemoglobin, glutenin, so hemagglutinin HA or hemagglutinin British is hemotrimeric glycoprotein. So this is a protein, right? This virus has a protein, coronavirus as well, a specific protein found on the surface of influenza virus. So because this is the way virus changes, it changes its protein structure, and then it has more binding affinity. Binding affinity means it will attack more the body cells, right? And so this is what has happened with this coronavirus as well. So what he is talking about is hemagglutinin is a protein, hemotrimeric is a protein which composed of three identical units. So hemotrimeric is identical unit, it has three. Hemotrimer is you can see here, this one is a protein which is composed of three identical units. So right, on the surface of influenza virus. So that is fusion protein 1. So there are three types. So we're not going to take you in too much detail of the science, but it has three kind of proteins, right? And then it has three identical unit of polypeptide. Polypeptide is, the is a unit of protein, right? Different peptides, many peptides. The unit of protein is a peptide, and there are many peptides, but it's identical three peptides they have. So three peptides, right? Is a class fusion protein and then membrane fusion protein. Therefore, H has a response binding virus. The celiac acid is the surface target cell, such as cells on the upper respiratory tract, following which the event virus is. Secondly, H is responsible for fusion of the viral envelope with the. So he's talking about the mechanism how the virus attacks. He's talking about pH as well, exposed to low pH. Lead and once exposed to a low pH is good for the virus. So he's talking about low pH. The name comes from the protein ability to cause red blood cells to clump together. Oh, that's what people were saying. So the red blood cell can clump together, and then they don't function, the way they should. That's why the breathing problem occurs. The hemagglutinin comes from the protein ability to cause red blood cells, erythrocytes, to clump together. Right. So we're not going to go in much detail, but we just say these are three types. Subtypes is HA, right? Influenza A, influenza A, and then H1 through H16. So these are different strains and different types. Now we go again where we were. So this was hemagglutinin three identical protein layers, right? The globular head of the domains, there will be the one head, globular type, right? Domain of the H1 and H2. Because there are three layers, right? He is saying one will be H, other will be H2, exhibit substantial antigenic differences. He's saying those exhibit substantial, their antigen are different. So if antigen will be on H1, it will be different, and H2 that will be different. Substantial mean there is a lot of difference in those antigens. However, the start domain on which they rest is nearly identical. So, however, the start domain on which the rest is nearly identical. Who rests? Because of the sequential ordering of the pandemic hemoglobin subtype. He's talking about this subtype, right? They had H1, H2 different, but he is talking about the domain of which the rest is identical. So the difference is in H1, H2, inducing a substantial level of cross-protective immunity between the two subtypes. So he is saying that these two types have cross-protective immunity between the two subtypes. H3 hemoglobin, however, there is another type, because we talk about this is a hemagglutinin three-layer protein, and what happens is with H3. So these two has antigenic differences, and what happens is inducing a substantial level of cross-protective immunity. So they are cross-protective immunity. Cross-protective immunity. What is a cross-protective immunity? You can look to make the things clear. So if you are infected to one, and then cross-protective immunity is a more a narrow meaning of the reaction between an antibody and the antigen. Oh God, yeah. So this is the reaction. Cross-protective immunity mean because they are different antigen, and the antigen will be react. So if you have immunity against certain, it's kind of giving a different blood group. So if you have immunity against this one, then another antibody comes, there will be severe reaction of immune system, and that will cause inflammation, and then secretion in the lungs. That's what I think going on in a coronavirus case. We will think about what is going on, but that is what can happen. Cross reactivity has more narrow meaning. So between antibody and antigen, so narrow meaning reaction between antibody and antigen that differ from immunogen. Okay, so antibody and antigen mean you have one virus, right? Coronavirus, and you will have antibody. But if you have antigen before against this antibody, mean you have been exposed before to a virus whose antigen are different than this virus, and then your antibody and antigen are going to be have a war, and that will cause a severe immune reaction that differs from the immunogen, right? So what will happen then? It is sometimes referred to as cross immunity, cross protective immunity. Although cross reactivity doesn't necessarily infer cross protection. So yes, this is an again the same thing they have explained here. Cross protective immunity by vaccine based on conserved antigen does not completely prevent infection but greatly reduces morbidity, mortality, virus replication, and thus viral shedding and spread. Such immunity is especially effective and long lasting. Here he is talking about different cross protective vaccine based on conserved antigen does not completely prevent infection but greatly reduces morbidity, mortality, virus replication. This is given other thing. Why he's saying is here that reaction between antibody and antigen that differs from aminogen. So they are different, but still they are reacting. It is sometimes referred to as cross immunity. It should be like the way we read here is if you have antibody before, right? Then it should protect you. That's what cross protective immunity response by influenza vaccine you can have. Yeah, cross protective is kind cross protective is mean mean if you have been exposed before is immunity applied to the reaction between two different species as opposed to the self reactivity. In chemistry it signifies reaction between two different molecules. Is immunity applies to the reaction between two different species as opposed to the self reactivity. So yeah, cross okay, so different you have been exposed before, right? And then you have immunity, right? Cross reactivity, I'm not going to go here, but cross reactivity is a more narrow meaning, the reaction between an antibody and antigen that differ from immunogen. It is sometimes referred as a cross immunity or cross protective immunity. Cross protective immunity, we look here benefits, right? Benefits. So what are the benefits of this one? Cross protective immunity response. So cross are delivered via intravenous administration, nature infection by influenza virus, and here able to mount the local antiviral immunity, which has been thought to provide cross protection. So uh, impact of cross protective vaccination. Impact of cross vaccination can on epidemiological and evolutionary here immunity and hence the indirect protection of the unvaccinated. In the case of human influenza, such potential benefit of the massive vaccination. So it has a benefit response induced by if the broader immune response could be induced by current available influenza vaccine, it would benefit from the human again novel virus. So this is again. So he is saying if you have a vaccination before, right, and then you can be immunity against other viruses, and that's what he's talking about here, right? So cross protective immunity response induced by sequential influenza, the same virus infection, and by sequential vaccination with inactivated influenza vaccines. Uh, so sequential infection with anti-genetically distinct influenza viruses induce cross-protective immune response against heterologous virus strain in animal models. So they are the viruses different. Again, what happen is so they protect the animal model. However, investigate whether the sequential immunization the same as we were studying. Immunization with the anti-genetically distinct influenza vaccine can also provide cross protection. To this end, we compared immune response and protective potential against challenge with this one in mice infected sequentially with another form. Uh, so this is the same form followed by the another different form. So whole inactivated virus or summit vaccine derived from these viruses essentially effective provided said cross potential against H1 infection while the sequential vaccination with V1 not capable of preventing the weight loss upon infection uh, the mice from the reaching the human endpoint. So yeah, if you have been before exposed to the virus and you have immunity against the next virus if they are they are on the if they are on different even strands, the global health domain exhibits substantial antigenic differences. Even their antigenic, they have some different. However, the Stark domain, because they rest on the same identical, so a substantial level of cross-protective immunity between the two subtypes. So he's saying two subtypes there is immunity, right? And then we talk about the third form of hemagglutinin, which is protein layer 3 identical. So what happened here is uh, we're going to finish after that and we'll summarize what we learned. Different in both head and stalk domain from H1 and H2, because the third one is of course different from these subtype, and therefore unlikely elicited a cross protective immunity. So he's saying because that's different, so that will not provide the immunity. Sorry. So because those were unlike, because those were similar, right? Head and stalk differ in both head and stalk, right? Because their domain, these have differ in both head and stalk from H1 and H2, because these reside on the same, that I have said, they resides on the same yeah, same head. So that's why we read here they reside on the same, but these one proteins are residing on different. Where the antigen is formed, the global head domain of H1 exhibits substantial, so because they are both on the head, likely because the sequential ordering of the pandemic hemagglutinin subtype, the global head domain H1 H2 exhibits substantial antigenic differences. However, the Stark domain, so these are global head domain both, because they both are in a head. So they are, if antigen is here, right, so they will provide immunity. However, the Stark domain, which is rest nearly, they rest nearly, likely inducing a substantial level of cross protective immunity. So that's identical. But this one other domain, right, we're talking about other domain, right? So what happened with the other domain? So other domain differ in both head and stalk domain from H1 and H2, so it does differ. Then what? Subtypes, right? Therefore, the unlikely cross protective response to either of the two. So it will be any response to either this one or this one antigen, right? Therefore, unlikely, right? If the 1890 pandemic was indeed caused by H3, he's saying if this was this type of flu, H3 flu, right? The commitment very early in the life to this subtype. So if someone is exposed to this subtype, they should have provided immunity against this one, right? But what he's going to say is, if was commitment very early in the life to this subtype would have led to the immune profile offering little or no harmful protection. Yes. So if you have been exposed to this and then if antigenically dissimilar, different H1 subtype, you won't have immunity against this one, right? That emerged in 1988. So you won't have immunity against this one. So what happened with old people? Oh, I see. So old people were exposed to these kind of viruses before, right? This one, either H1 or H2, but this was a flu which happened, we can say is if it is a Russian one, 1891. So they didn't have immunity to this one, this flu. So old people have immunity, right? This is another theory he's giving. Life in this type. So he is saying like if you have he's just supposing if this virus has antigen at this site, then what will have happened is very early this subtype would have led an immune profile offering little or no immunity. So protection to antigenically dissimilar H1 subtype that emerged in 1900. So that's another theory that they won't have any benefit, leaving the pattern of age-specific mortality dominated by differential severity described in the paper. Finally, the age-specific expression of mortality in any pandemic is contingent on the population experience of previous pandemics. So what he's saying is if you have a previous exposure to a virus, right, and then you can have immunity if the antigen, if the virus has antigen, of which is residing in the same kind of protein strand, like this in this case it was a head-on, and then you are exposed to another virus which is the similar kind, you have immunity. But he was giving the two theories here. And if I just go in the beginning what he's written, and then we finish it and we summarize it. So what was the heading of this? Age-specific mortality during influenza pandemic, and unraveling the mystery of high young adult. So if we just read the subtract, that should tell us everything. The worldwide spread of novel influenza, it was H1N1 virus in 2009, showed that influenza remains a significant health threat even for the individual in the prime of the life. The paper focuses on usually high young adult, high mortality observed during what? Observed during the age of 28 during pandemic, and argue that this increased mortality resulted early from what? From early life exposure of to influenza. So why they died more? He said early life exposure to the influenza. What influenza? During the previous Russian flu 1898, because they were exposed to that. So why they were exposed more? We pursued that the specific instant the development of immunological memory to an influenza virus in the early life may lead to the dysregulated immune response. So that's why saying they have memory before, but those antigen was opposite to the antigens. They reacted. Their antibodies reacted with the antigen they have before. That's what they have proposed. This is one way, right? One proposal. Other proposal is they were not protected from this one. Other old people were exposed to a virus before, which was a protective, right? So there's two theory they have produced. In early life may lead to dysregulated immune response to the anti to what? To anti-genetically novel. So this is the anti-genetically novel strain. Anti-genetically novel strain encountered in the later life. So they were anti-genetically novel strain, thereby increasing the risk of death. Exposure during the critical period of the development novel strain development create a holes in the T cells. So says it exposure during the critical period of the development could also produce a hole in T cells and retire and impair fetal maturation in general, right? Thereby increasing the mortality from the infection disease later in life. So if you are exposed before, he says T cell peritoyer and impair fetal maturation in general. Uh, so T cells is kinda it says they have changed, right? So if we just look one thing here and then we summarize anti-genetically novel strains. So we will read what is the meaning anti-genetically novel. So in that case, he's saying is the situation get worse, right? Anti-genetically novel strains. Why the situation get worse? Anti-genetically novel strain a synthesis virus anti-genetically like their conventional egg or cell. Anti-genetically anti-genetic novel we don't know novel mean new, we just say genetically strains, genetic anti-genetic genetic anti-genetic. So I think we just strain we know, anti-genetic we just look what is the meaning of anti-genetic. So anti-genetic is substance that can stimulate the production of antibody and combine specifically with them. Okay, so antibody and combine with them, right? So that's what happened. Mean they're saying their red blood cells were coagulating, so produce antibodies and combine specifically with them. That's what anti-genetic is. Any substance that can stimulate the production of antibody and combine with them. First, the pharmacologically commercial substance that were injected to absorb into animal tissue stimulate the production of antibody antigen of the particular type collectively. So antigenetic variations, we can look a little bit here. Antigenetic variation is refers to mechanism by which the infection such as whoever on the surface and then avoid the host immune response. So antigenetic variation is a variation, a mechanism by which infection agent alter protein on its surface and thus avoid the host immune response. It relates to phase variation. Antigenetic variation not only enable the pathogen to avoid the immune response in its current host, but also allows the reinfect the previously infected host. So if there is any variation, you can be reinfect again, because what happens is it changes the protein, right? Now if we go to the paper again, um, so we understand why is the antigenetic variation. So antigenetically novel strain mean you will be affected again because it has a protein changes protein, and so thereby increasing the risk of death, right? So may lead to dysregulated immune response. He is saying immune response is dysregulated. Right. So what can we conclude now? We just going to finish and we conclude something. So we learned two things, right? One was that um, young people died more uh, with this flu virus, and this was 1898 Russian flu, and then 1918 was Spanish flu. So what we studied in this paper was that young people died more and they were exposed to this virus, right? And they died more. So he's saying that because they were exposed to this virus and their immune system reacted very badly. And now there was old people, they were exposed to this virus as well, I will expect. But before they were exposed to a virus which has same kind of strain, so they have immunity against 19 Spanish flu. So then then in this paper he proposed, we can propose two theories. The one theory is if you have exposed before a virus which is a kind of similar kind of strain, then it can give you immunity. But if it is a different strain, it won't give you any immunity, and in some cases it can weaken your immune system, or it can make you more prone to the next new strain. So now if we look just the why is this coronavirus doing, so if we look at this virus, coronavirus age, right? So this is above 18, more deaths, right? And then is a difference. So what we can say is these people, there is one theory, these people have not been exposed to a virus in the form of vaccination. And we will, in next lecture, we will look at the vaccines, which vaccines these people has not been exposed. These one, especially, they have more death rate, and also these ones, these 10 to 19, and which is the new vaccine which came here, right, which are making them zero fatality. So we will look all the vaccines and we will look if vaccines have any role. But there is another thing, that this virus attacks through the lungs, right? And then with the age, lungs age, and then there is a more chance that protective gear, there is three layered protection against viruses in our body. And if I just immune system, we look, immune system, it has three layers, so those layers get weak, become weak with when we get aged. So that can be another reason that three layered immune system, so that one layered defense we say, and innate immune system, there's one, and then it will be right. If we just look innate, layered defense, right? Layered defense is so what is the layered defense? We have a layered defense, right? The three layers I remember. So layered defense, the immune system protects the host from infection with layered defense, increasing specifically in simple terms physical barrier prevent pathogens such as bacteria, viruses from entering the organism. Just such as we have skin, it doesn't allow to enter the virus, but it can enter through the nose because there's no physical barrier. Innate immune system provides the intermediate but non-specific response. So this is the intermediate response. So this innate immune system gets weakened with the age because the surface of the skin changes. They become a little bit porous. Skin changes. So there are alveoli in the lungs, and the lungs has a capacity to like clean the lungs. There are hair-like structures, very thin structures, thread-like structures. They keep blowing the air out, and those capacity decreases with the age. The innate immune system. So what does it? That's a sexually evade the innate response vertebra. So immune system adapts the response during the infection to prove the recognition of the pathogen. Improved response is retained after pathogen has been eliminated in the form of. So this is innate. I think that can be the difference. So these are different units of the immune system, but there can be the one reason that still there is a immunity weak of some people with the age, and the layer defense is weak. So if we just look three layered, if we have immune system, if I just write here three layered immune system, let me write layered immune system, layered, three layered immune system, right? Layered immune system is going to show us the same, the many layered immunity, right? Layered evolution of the immune system, again we're going to come the same way. Well, immune system. So immune system is a host defense system, we know that. And then I did read that the virus can enter through this, not enter through skin, right? They enter through the lungs and nose, but they, these kind of, there is a barrier, and that barrier become weak. This system become weak with the age, right? So this is another thing. But if we ignore this one, right? If we look at the Spanish flu, that didn't happen. So from that we can say that it's not necessary. Let me look at the paper again. I think we don't need to open the paper, right? We just say so. So if we talk about 70, 90, 60, 90, so immune systems in Spanish flu, this doesn't happen. Another thing is, and the people are dying, even young people, right? The old people are dying more. But the thing is, they are dying due to inflammation, right? And the inflammation is in the lungs due to reaction of the immune system. But thing is, if your immunity is strong, there shouldn't be much inflammation. I think the virus should be killed. But the thing is, virus is not being killed. So what happens is then, if you have weak immune system, the virus doesn't get killed, but it keep multiplying inside the cells. Cells burst, so your skin get damaged. It's kind of scars. So you get scars in the lungs and then the nose. This causes inflammation, and then the virus, it causes more response. The more secretions come out from the lungs. So it's possible that the immunity has something to do. If you have a weak immune system, then your chances of dying are more. Um, but vaccine give immunity. So we will look in our next lecture, next video, that is there a role of vaccine, like these young children have more immunity, because the one thing is surprising in 1918 flu, these children, they were the more fatality of these children. I mean, they didn't have any immunity, so this time they have immunity. So from this, I was thinking vaccine has a role, because these children shouldn't have immunity, but they are spared. This means the vaccine has a role. And what I was thinking is these three age group has some kind of vaccine. They have got a similar kind of vaccine which is protecting them from this new strain, and then this has also, this age group has also some kind of vaccine, right? And this has also some kind of vaccine where that's protecting them, but this age group doesn't have a vaccine, right? And this doesn't have some kind of vaccines. There's a role of immunity as well, but so much difference. Then I was thinking their immune system is like taking this virus as a new. It hasn't seen this and is reacting